Hello, and thank you for joining me today with my conversation with Xuan Juliana Wang, one of the five 2020 Young Lions Fiction Award finalists. My name is Vincent Piazza, a member of the Young Lions Committee. And each year, the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award champions emerging writers, recognizing innovation and excellence in contemporary fiction. This year, the award marks its 20th anniversary, celebrating the next generation of outstanding fiction writers. The 2020 Young Lions Fiction Award finalists include Steph Cha for Your House Will Pay, Julia Phillips for Disappearing Earth, Kylie Reed for Such a Fun Age, Brian Washington for Lot, and Xuan Juliana Wang for Home Remedies. Now you can see these interviews with all of the finalists at nypl.org/YLFA. Today, I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak with Xuan Juliana Wang, who's nominated for her novel Home Remedies. Now, Juliana was born in Heilongjiang, China, but after age 7, she did most of her growing up in Los Angeles. Her short fiction has appeared in publications like The Atlantic, Ploughshares, Narrative, Gigantic, The Brooklyn Rail, and has been included Pushcart's anthology and Best American Nonrequired Reading for 2016. So, Juliana, congratulations on all the success for Home Remedies and everything else. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to check in with you, given the circumstances right now. Are you and yours navigating this COVID crisis okay? You've been managing well?
We've been good. We've been good. I feel very fortunate to be able to have a home that is quiet, and we just moved into our first house right before the shutdown began, and like my husband made this shelf in our basement because we have so much time on our hands.
It's incredible carpentry. Looking at it through the camera, you set up some great production value for all your Zoom sessions.
Architects.
How's it been for you as a writer? I mean, with all this time really kind of hunkered down in one place, have you been finding that writing has come easier, or has it been in some ways more challenging?
I feel that I've taken a lot of time in the last few weeks reading, and I found it quite difficult to focus on my own work, to be quite honest. I taught a class online, a literature seminar, and that was very fulfilling. I don't know, I can't believe that this time has passed so quickly. Maybe because, I don't know, I've been thinking that, most of my family still lives in Asia, and they've gone through this like 3 times already. And they kept telling me that what the future was going to be like. First you're going to buy toilet paper, and then you'll stay home for a long time, and then it'll be over. But it's like now with some of our courses have diverted, and I don't really know what's going to happen now.
Yeah, we seem to be on a kind of a very unique track here, without getting too political in it all. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is my first time going through something like this, and I agree with you. But I will say that time is kind of bent in this weird way that I've never experienced before, where I'll have a week fly by that feels like it's 5 minutes, and then suddenly I'll look back at the accumulation of some other kind of effort, and I'm like, wow, I did an awful lot in this seemingly short period of time. So, but yeah, I was curious really about what the experience for you has been like. I mean, I don't think anyone could have possibly predicted that when you release a novel, your debut novel, that suddenly on the other side of it, there's going to be a global pandemic that is going to kind of change the way that experience is. But you did get some time out once you released the book last year. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. My collection came out last May, and I was able to, go to 10 cities and talk about it in the last year. I found the experience really, it was everything I thought it was everything I wanted, but also different than anything I expected. Maybe because I wrote these stories, you know, over the course of 10 years in a vacuum without ever thinking without ever really knowing that anybody would read it, and also without thinking about what people expected me to write about. It was interesting to hear their reactions.
Well, that's interesting. When did you know that work was done incubating, in a sense? Like, when did you feel like, oh, I think I've reached the end of something?
Well, I worked on each story. So I wrote the first story while I was still living in Beijing in my early 20s. And I finished the last story in my early 30s in New York. I think those are that's when I began and finished the first drafts of these stories. And I think when did I know they were all done is towards the end of the process. I spent maybe like a month and a half sitting with each individual story and trying to make it. I think I noticed if there was an ache coming from each story, something that felt most true or something that felt like I was putting myself on the line, and I tried to make that part stronger. And then when I was done with that, I knew that this is it. This is my 20s. I'm not going to be the same person writing these stories anymore. And then I knew I could let it go.
Wow. Wow. It's just such writing, as it always seems to be, is an incredibly personal process. But to go through it in that way, I always admire the stamina that a novelist has to stick with an idea. And short story writing is one of my favorite mediums, because I just love the satisfaction you can get at arriving at the end of each story. What would you say, like, when you took that month and a half with each of these stories, what would you say, like, the commonality, or was there like a creative spine that you realized in your journey?
I'm devoted to short stories. Like, if you look at my bookshelf, like a whole 2 rows are all short story anthologies and short story collections, because I didn't read anything else for a long time. I think until my late 20s, I started to read novels. I just love short stories. And I think there's something about this form that's so alive, and so there's stories that I've read that I feel like I tell people to the point where they think it's happened to me, like it's something that's in my life, but it's actually just a short story that I've read. And when I was going through and trying to edit that, I feel like I treated each story as an experience that should be unique. It should have a very unique point of view. It should have a unique kind of plot, and no voice should be alike. And tonally, no 2 stories should be alike. So it was really easy for me to really focus on each story as if it were, a novel. Just try to figure out everything there was to think about each character, and what their mom did, and what they like to cook, and why they are the way they are, and who their friends are. And then once I kind of immersed myself in that world and gave myself a month and a half in it, I think then it felt very pleasurable to work on it again. But I needed to kind of push all of the other ones aside and just focus on one for each one to be finished.
Right. Well, that to me, like, certainly explains success with anything, is that the love is in the details, when you're able to go through with such fine brushstrokes and explore characters in that way, and plot and motivation. It's just, I think it jumps off the page for any reader, which is always a pleasure. When you are out in the normal world, the pre-COVID times, and you spent your 20s and into your 30s writing these stories, where did you, tell me about your writing process? Like, did you find yourself writing privately, publicly? Did you rely on a certain kind of inspiration, either within yourself or around you?
I think I'm the first to admit that I write a lot from personal experience. Not directly. It's not that I'm trying to record situations or record conversations that actually happened to me. It's more of a feeling. I think it began, I started to write these stories when I moved back to Beijing right after undergrad. And I, had lived in the US from age 7 until age 20. And as soon as I arrived in Beijing, I felt like I disappeared. It was this really freeing experience. I arrived and I looked like everybody else for the first time that I could remember. And the language that I had gotten a lot rustier, like over time, just came back to me. And I felt that I fit in right into this world, and I could observe people without anybody noticing that I wasn't from there. I can try to make myself stand out at will. I don't know. It was just a very it's just a very interesting experience as a writer, as somebody who like is interested in stories about people. So I think I started I love having conversations, with like taxi drivers, with my neighbors, and I made friends in Beijing. I worked as a translator, I worked as a producer, and I think these experiences all kind of found their way into my stories. Not direct, not like, again, not like a documentary form, but I think I felt this energy of just people, of people and the place, and I wanted to write about it. And I think my best writing comes from that. Like, it comes from me moving about the world, just feeling things and experiencing things. And maybe often I find that I write myself out of the story. In the beginning, there would be a character that would kind of resemble me, but eventually she would kind of exit the story because I would find the other characters much more interesting.
Very interesting. So much of it sounds to me like is that travel has been a big part of it, but also this kind of unique vantage you have of Chinese origin and a relationship with the United States, and kind of seeing the world you see, but almost through two lenses.
Yeah.
Would you say the book, the quality of it and these stories, it kind of brings these two worlds together?
I've been thinking about that a lot as I've been talking about these stories. I think it is exactly that. I think I happen to be able to sit and to kind of operate in these two worlds. And I feel consciously Chinese beyond just my name. And I also feel consciously American from growing up here. And I write in English, in a language that my parents can't read, which is kind of the biggest freedom I have ever felt. And I think my purpose in writing has always to write this world that I come from, this kind of global world where maybe I feel like hasn't really been represented in American literature in English. And I wanted to write characters with all their complexity and humanity, who are just as funny and fucked up, and I wanted to write about human beings, right? And I think there's so few people that have this vantage point into this kind of, I don't know, just not trying to write for American lens or from a Chinese perspective. It's just, I know there's a lot of people like me out there, and I just wanted to write a story from this global perspective.
Yeah, but it sounds like it transcends ethnicity. It's just about the human experience and travel. And you reminded me of a story. I was down in Atlanta, and I got into a car, and I started chatting up with my driver that I had, and I asked him, he had a specific accent. He was from the Eastern Bloc, and he said, I said, well, which do you have you grown? You've been in America for a while. Have you grown to like one more than the other? And he goes, the way I look at it is, he goes, back home will always be my mother, but America's my wife. He goes, I love them both, but just very different.
Hmm.
And I really admired the simplicity of his take on it. And it just sounds like the ability to write with both of those in mind is just sounds like an incredible gift that you are taking advantage of, which
Yeah,
should be exciting to anyone who reads your work.
I hope
Which is
so.
great. Yes. And are you, so when it comes to short stories, did you find that there were stories you'd written that maybe didn't make the cut,
Yeah.
that didn't end up in the book? Now, do
Mhm.
you intend to like put those in a drawer and like maybe burn sage over them or something just to kind of put them away? Or do you expect to kind of bring it around and maybe recycle them in some way for a future work?
I honestly think that, so first of all, so many stories didn't make the cut. Even some of the stories were just, I felt like there's two stories that were too similar, so that if I could
Mm.
just make one better, then the other one doesn't need to exist. But I'm the kind of person that I'm writing constantly, and I'm kind of disorganized, so I'm always writing new stories, and I'm losing them in my computer on purpose, almost. And maybe if there's a deadline for a magazine, or if my agent is like asking me for a story, I have so many things that are half finished, and I enjoy that. I think there's like a surprise to it. Like I've forgotten many things about the stories. I can come in there with like a new sense of invention and freedom. And I think for the stories that didn't make the cut, it just goes back into the wilderness of my computer. And maybe if someday I want to visit it again, or maybe I'll just forget what it was and get a new
I,
computer. It's okay.
I love the fact that it's like that drawer that everyone has in their
Yeah.
house, but except you can reach in and pull out like some, kind of literary work that you can finish off and maybe put out into the world.
Yeah.
That's really kind of magical. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to thank you for your time. I don't want to take up too much with everything you have going on and the
Yeah.
exciting few days you have ahead. I know we didn't get into your personal life, but regardless, congratulations on
Thank you.
everything you have going on and on the nomination. I guess I'd be remiss just to with leaving without the question is: have libraries impacted your life in any way, your career? Could you talk a little bit about that before we
I'm,
sign off?
I'm so glad you're asking me this. I think this award means so much to me because I grew up in libraries. Like many immigrant kids, I was just dropped off at the local library after school. I used to stay there until I walked there from school, and I used to stay there until my parents could pick me up from work. And I spent so much of my life, like I read every, like the teenage sections. I learned English that way. I moved on to all the Danielle Steele because those are the thickest ones. And then I feel like so much of my life happened in my local library. And then even now, I'm always telling people about, I'm trying to read two trying to read two ebooks and listen to two audiobooks within my 21-day trial period. And I'm always the 21-day loan period. And I think, the best emails I've gotten about my book so far has been people discovering it in their local libraries. It's because they're not coming at it with any expectations. And when they write me these emails about how the stories have touched them, I feel like this is all I've ever wanted, to be in a library like the way. So maybe somebody like me one day can just happen upon these stories and maybe it'll move them.
I, I think that's great to hear from your side of it because from where I'm sitting, whenever I stumble across a book that no one had recommended to me that I just kind of laid eyes on and kind of got intrigued by either the title or something, is always the most kind of satisfying. So that's kind of great that it's a similar experience
Yeah.
from your side of things. So that's wonderful, Juliana. Thank you again for all your time and congratulations on the nomination
Thank you.
and everything you have going on. And I hope you and yours remain safe through all we're going through at the moment.
Okay. Thanks so much.